An initial look at Conclave.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is another video update from me, Øystein Hansen at Ada Nordpol. I'm experimenting with different type of video content, and this time we're actually going to look at a tweet, and then we're going to look at a research paper from IOG or IOHK that's about conclave, or the so-called secret assembly. In this case, conclave actually means something way more awesome. It actually means, drumroll, a way for sticking pools to combine forces and together produce blocks. And that's, if implemented, would probably be pretty huge for the single pool people, the struggling pools, the XSPO, the small XPO alliance, and for everyone in the ecosystem really, because it's a way to counterbalance the tendency for the rich to get richer and for the ecosystem to centralize, and that's a big deal, and that's something I am way supportive of. So let's get into it. We'll now share a bit the screen. First we'll look at the tweet, and then we will look at the research paper. Okay, so the tweet by Ada Philippines is very interesting. It's behind the scenes, some devs are trying to come up with a solution to multi-SPOs versus single SPOs soon. And they continue, we have so much to tell, but we don't want to overpromise just yet. We will have more information in a more formal announcement soon. But we believe it will shake up the staking game, not only for small SPOs, but for delegators too. And if we see, they have a project that's about conclave. And I guess it's some form of simulations, conclave simulations. They just made an update, tweaked the ADA rewards calculation for whales. As we will see in the research paper, rewards will be split and the pro ratio based on your ADA staked or ADA pledged in the pool together. So you will get the rewards depending on your percentage of the total pledged. And they seem to be implementing with .NET and F#. And yeah, it's we don't know so much more. They have defined some total supply here. They are trying to look at difference in the supply, and that's all we can see from this screenshot. But it should be very interesting if they somehow have managed to implement even a fraction of what the Conclave research paper suggests. Then I think we are in for some very exciting times ahead. So let's look at the research paper. Let's see. Right, so here's the research paper. Conclave, a collective stake pool protocol. Just hearing those words, yeah, it's amazing. Now someone is actually trying to implement this. So what is Conclave? It's a formal design of a collective stake pool, a decentralized pool with no single point of authority. And they do this with what's called a weighted threshold signatures scheme, WTSS. So what does this actually do? Instead of it being one person, one operator behind a pool signing with its keys, you have multiple operators who will together sign a signature scheme. And there's a threshold on it, so depending on where's the threshold, then a certain amount of the total people, the collective, will be required to make the signature, and that's really powerful and really cool. So that would mean if you have 10 pool operators and the threshold was 7, you could make decisions with 7 signing for everyone. And of course you have to balance this, and as it will be said in this research paper, I think you can also set some of these parameters. It will be very interesting to see how they implement this. When we look at this research paper, we will not look at all of the math. Honestly, I have just read it once now, and to read a research paper, in my opinion at least, you need to read it several times truly understand everything behind it. So this is more of a initial impressions and more of the overall view of this paper. I will just highlight some of the things I find interesting. And they're trying to make it a fast and trustless setup, and with identifiable aborts. So these identifiable aborts, as I understand it, this would be more of how you would, for example, withdraw from the collective, how you would shut it down in a proper manner, like if the majority, let's say, wants to shut down the pool, how they would do this in an orderly manner and trustless, more importantly. And honestly, I don't know yet all of the implementation and what are the thresholds for the different functions, but it will be very interesting to see this if we actually have some form of implementation out in the wild, as we say, that people are starting to implement a form of conclave. And we should treat that with a lot of respect, but also as something that's really nice, that the community itself is trying to contribute and to experiment and to basically give power back to the smaller contestants, the smaller pools. I think that is overall a good thing, and nothing bad could possibly come out of such an experiment, as long as we are aware of that this is something new and we need to tread carefully, but I would really like to see some form of implementation of conclave. As we will talk more about, it seems to be something best suited for smaller pools to combine together. And if you are a big pool, you will not have big reasons to implement such a protocol. But for the smaller pools who can't produce a block on their own, this makes all the sense in the world, I guess. And that's something that's good for the decentralization of the ecosystem, as far as I can see. We will talk more about that, but just the fact that you can have more operators and not be vulnerable if, let's say, there's a few operators having a large portion of the network, that in itself has value to the network. So let's dive into it. So first of all, they're doing, as usual in introduction, they're doing some reflections on the current state of the art, and here we can see that, and I agree with this assessment, that they think both proof of work and proof of stake are economies of scale. They favor parties with large amount of participating power. This is obvious. It's so easy to see that there's a barrier of entry into most proof of stake ledgers. If you're a latecomer to Cardano, if you wanted to start now with Cardano, the amount of capital in US dollars or a currency you'd have to raise to have an effective pool is way larger than earlier. So the people who got in early and have the scale now, they have an advantage. Let's just call it what it is. And if you have that advantage, you will have this effect that the rich is getting richer, and you don't want that, actually, because that will mean a system will gradually become more and more centralized. And we see this especially in the debate about minimal attack vector, or the MAV. And this is especially true if there are operators of many pools, because the fewer people you will have to force, convince, or in some other way make them do your bidding when it comes to the network, the fewer you need to have a 51% majority, the more at risk your system is. And the MAV in Cardano is much greater than many other cryptocurrencies, but I believe it has been going down recently, and I believe that's not a good thing. So I think Conclave and other such solutions as well is going to be interesting experiments to try to counterweight this effect. So as they say here, a major drawback of existing staking pools is that they are typically managed by a single party, as I discussed now. And they they are single point of failure, basically. So in this way, with a joint collective pool, you don't have this single pool point of failure. You have multiple pool operators, and with a threshold. So even if you somehow make one bad actor out of 10 pool operators, then still with the threshold, probably the 9 others would do just fine. And in fact, we will see they even implement some form of penalty to the one behaving badly as well. So really interesting. When it comes to the pledge, of course, if you have operators who can pledge large amount of stake to the pool and they are preferred, the system will favor few major pool operators, and in the long run the wealth will be concentrated around them, resulting in what I said, like the rich will get richer. And this is true for all financial systems that are decentralized, because that is the nature of these resources. In any system that has this like economy of scale, then you will have this tendency that the larger players will become richer. Some other interesting, let's look more into like the details of it. So what is it designed to be? It's designed to be a collective pool that is operated by a small group of players. And as we will see, because they are talking about a shared mempool, where in the mempool you put all the transactions, and they're trying to make it like I guess net neutral, in the way that they will have a first come first serve type of method. And with this you need to share the mempool between the members. And if you had a huge collective of pools, that would be, I guess, hard technically to do, and especially from a latency point of view. So it's not something that's designed, as at least how I read the paper, for something like for 1,000 pools to combine together into one gigantic pool, or 100 or something like that. It's collected. It's meant for a small number of parties, and where they have a small stake disparity, that they have roughly the same amount of stake in the pool. And they design it so that the stake has a weight. So everyone gets an amount of rewards, for example, relative to their weight in this joint pool. But depending on if they contributed 10% of the stake, they will probably get 10% of the rewards. So they have some more points to this system, and what they are trying to satisfy of requirements. And they also, interestingly, want to set a limit, so you have to have enough stake above a threshold. And this is something that will be agreed upon during the pool's initialization. That to me suggests that this will be configurable. Like you can set it yourself somehow, like what will be the parameters to start this collective pool. And I guess that could mean a lot of experimenting, a lot of getting data from the market, like what works. Is it... and I guess naturally it will become something where it can't be very small, because if it's going to be a small number of parties, so this is more meant for probably the pool operators who are just below the threshold, and if they combine into a smaller group. And I guess this is social theory as well, like most don't have 100 friends. We have this close group of friends around us that we trust. Of course this is trustless, but still you have to reach out to someone and agree and set the parameters, so there's some element of trust in the initialization of the pool, at least. So this suggests to me like 10 less than that group, so that means that the stake itself should be relatively high, like we're talking 50, 100,000 ADA. Combined you have 1 million, for example, and that's just an example, but that should give you an idea of what I think they are going for here with this conclave. So they will have these proportional rewards depending on their proportion of the stake. They will have joint control of the rewards, and we should be careful here of the wording. They will have joint control over the access to the funds. and they will have a unilateral reward withdrawal. So at any point in time, a stakeholder should be able to claim the reward accumulated up to that point without interacting with other members of the pool. So this means something for the threshold. That means that at least for rewards, you should be able to claim them and do that without some form of threshold voting. It should be your portion of the rewards. And that makes sense. That's not a decision that needs the majority to vote for. And you should definitely design it in a way that you have as least as possible need for this signing and voting of multiple pool members. There's also a permissioned access. So you could actually join the pool following an agreement by a set from all the pool members. So I guess that's some form of hot joining or hot leaving. So that makes sense. If a pool is going to run for a long while, you would have this people lose interest, people find other ventures, they could leave after, and once they're left can vote to make a new set of pool operators join. And it should have a robustness against aborting. So the pool should not fail to participate in consensus unless an admissible set of members aborts or is corrupted. Okay, so basically, like I now think I understand better the aborting part. So aborting here seems to mean that they are not participating in consensus. They are not voting with and putting out blocks at the correct time. And the corrupted part is if you actually do something that is not correct with the majority ledger and trying to push out some information that's against the current ledger. Or, for example, double signing is something we see quite often, or forks, I guess. And that's actually interesting. If forks will be considered a form of corruption, I would assume no, because there's so many forks, really. If you look at how many forks are, and we call them like micro forks or micro forks, but it's not it's something that's relatively common. So I guess would be interesting to know more of. Is forks somehow affected by this robustness against aborting? And they should be publicly verifiable. So the consensus and everything should be publicly available, and it should take in account aggregated pool stake. So I guess it will show like the total amount of pledge, how its block is produced and when, and everything like that. So stake reallocation, you should be able to freely change personal stake allocated to the pool without interacting with other members of the pool. Okay, that's interesting. So I guess you could have this, if you can freely change your personal stake, you could maybe have this scenario where suddenly 8 out of 10 withdraw their stake, and you had this much smaller stake. Maybe you wouldn't fall under the threshold to produce a block, but it would not hurt the overall network, I assume, unless many did this at the same time. And if you did that, you will still hold the same amount of stake to do a 51% attack anyway, so it should not matter. So okay, it makes sense. You should be able to do that freely. And an unmissable set of parties. So it doesn't specify how many really. They should be able to update the stakes pool's parameters. So I guess some form of threshold, and then you can update the pool parameters. It will be interesting if it's like say a majority or all type of vote that everyone has to agree for some major pool parameter changes, or if it's different voting requirements for different pool parameters. And you should be able to force removal of a member from the pool. Oh, that's interesting. I could definitely see that spawn some arguments. Some are parties suddenly fall into a disagreement and are basically kicked out of a pool, but they would still be able to get the rewards, be able to withdraw their stake. So the worst that would happen is they would have to start over again. But that's something to keep in mind, definitely. And I guess it could cause some discussions about this mechanism. So pool closing you should also be able to do with an unmissable set of parties, whatever that actually means, if it means a majority or more than that. But yeah, it makes sense that there's a threshold and you could close the pool if most of the people assigned to it agrees. And I guess they will have some form of checking that you are not staking to two different pools at the same time, and that's of course needed to prevent this type of double staking. Wow, that's a lot of cool information. I will skip now to a few parts. There's quite a lot of the math part. I'm going to look more carefully into this myself. When it comes to this weighted threshold signatures, so I found it interesting. It's each pool member is giving a share of the pool's private key. So it's actually, it seems to be one private key, but you have a share of it, and it's weighted by your stake. So, does that mean that your share of the private key can change as your stake changes? Wow, that's a mind blowing. So it's like the security will float over time. Like this person is the one that has the majority. Let's say if it's not equal distributed, one have more. That's very hard for an attacker then to know, like who should I go after to get this pool. That's cool. If that's how, if I understood it correctly, it's really cool. So every message produced by the pool, for example certificates or new blocks, as I discussed, is signed using a weighted threshold scheme. Wow. So it seems it's not one pool who signs the block, even one block is produced by one of the pool members. It's actually signed by multiple pool members. Interesting. I will skip to another part I found interesting. So when the stake pool management, you establish this staking pool, and you do this in two parts. The pool members gather and jointly decide to create a staking pool. They contact each other via off-chain. So here's the social part. Agree on the pool's parameters, so you can definitely set them as you wish, and generate its key, not keys. So it's one key that's shared among the members. Very, very cool. Importantly, the participants are aware of the total number of participants in the pool as well as their weights. So this must be somehow published as you generate this key then, maybe. So you will see your weight as part of this. And if this actually even can change as your stake changes, wow, that's such a cool idea. Then the members of the pool perform a setup protocol and registers the new pool via a registration certificate, which signed by the pool's key and published on the ledger. I wonder if you need, do you need another type of certificate with this type of signature, or how you would do that? That's really interesting. I have no idea myself, but it seems to suggest you can just make a regular certificate, and maybe this weighted threshold key can be used just as other signing keys. I honestly don't know enough about it to form an opinion about it, but that's something to be interesting to look at. Following the pools received rewards for participating in a consensus protocol. The rewards are managed by a smart contract. Oh, okay. So, this is interesting. So I hope the stake is not inside this smart contract. That would be harder than from a safety standpoint, like to trust. But I don't mind the rewards, and especially if any party can withdraw at any time, that's very fine. But it would be interesting to see if you have to also have this stake into this smart contract. Each party can withdraw their part, which is proportional to their internal stake distribution. Finally, to close the pool, the members sign and publish a revocation certificate. certificate. Oh, the member sign. So when it comes to how many, this wording seems to suggest all, the member sign, but it's not clear to me really. Can let's say 7 out of 10 revoke a pool? That would be interesting to see. Okay, what else did I find interesting? To construct a distributed mempool, we consider a sub-selection mechanism to identify the parties that verify each transaction. And this is interesting. The mechanism should be non-interactive, deterministic, and balanced. Every party should be chosen with the same probability. So they have this distributed mempool. A mempool is where you put all the transactions that's not yet out, and you store them in memory until you put them on the block. And it seems to be that they have to share this, and this should be done in a non-interactive way, so it should be automatically done. That to me suggests that you will have to do some modification of the Cardano node itself. I don't know, but I think that has to be the case. I'm not sure, but how would you else make sure that the mempool is distributed? And deterministic, so you should be able to know in advance. You should be able to cause and affect it. And balanced. Balanced, I guess, means distributed evenly among the parties. But what does this mean here? Does it mean that even you have a lower stake than others, you would still have... Yeah, it should be, I guess, because every member should have all of the same mempool, because if it's going to be first in, first out, it has to be distributed equally. So balance should probably then mean that every member will have the exact same information and at the same time distributed. But this last part here, every party should be chosen with the same probability, seems to suggest that it's updated one by one. So maybe, I can't really get my mind around it yet. But definitely what I can draw from it is that you need to have this distributed mempool. And for me, then the first thing that comes to mind is like latency. How do you do this in a way? Let's say there's a pool member in Europe, one in Asia, one in Africa. How do you distribute this mempool? Does it mean we will have to have these geographically closed members? Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, how this will evolve. And I guess they are considering different implementations, because they discuss a straightforward way to implement this subselection is to assume that the pool's members are ordered in a well-defined manner, lexicographically. And then there's a lot of math I need to look more carefully into. Wow. So they have this randomness beacon. Okay. Honestly, I need to look more into this. The honest member needs to always have the same view of the distributed mempool. Oh, so that seems to suggest to me you need to have everyone have the same information, because you need to have the same view of the distributed mempool. This is achieved via authenticated broadcast. Assuming a public key infrastructure, as in our setting, it's possible to achieve deterministic authentication broadcast in T+1 rounds for T1 adversarial parties. So let's say that some of the pool members does something bad, T of the pool members, then you would still, after rounds, I don't know what rounds mean here. Does it mean a slot? Does it mean something else? A tick? A 20-second period? What does a round mean here? I'm not sure. But after a while, they will still be able to have this deterministic view of what's the correct mempool. Each time a party adds a transaction to its mempool, it's broadcasted, such that at any point in time, the honest members of the pool have the same view of the network. Aha! So if it has to be this way, that at any point in time, and you have to broadcast it when you add the transaction to the mempool, that means that you have to broadcast all the time. So yeah, really, latency is what I'm thinking most of here. how would this work in practicality? Because we have this like time window in Cardano. You want to have stuff under 5 seconds before you receive it and you produce the block. That's a really important target, and preferably under 1 second or under 3 seconds at least. So latency matters. It really does. So there's some form of sub-protocol where you form a consensus about each transaction's validity. So basically you are checking, the pool members are checking each other and checking, is this transaction valid? Is it the same as we have in all our mempools? Finally, the output of the consensus protocol is broadcasted to the rest of the pool. So, okay, it seems like you have to do this check, and then finally you would do this transaction, and then it will be broadcasted and updated to the rest of the pools. Let's see, I had some more notes. All right, a mempool consists of millions of transactions, and verifying them requires an accurate view of the ledger. Thus, both objects may require significant amounts of computation complexity and storage. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. How would you do this in if you're going to have the same information in everyone? You can't like share the work burden. Everyone has to have the same type of computational and power. So even if this lowers barriers of entry in the capital requirements, it's probably not going to lower any barriers of entry when it comes to hardware. I guess you would still, as the Cardano improves and there's more and more transaction, my theory, as I said way back in 2019, is we will need stronger and stronger hardware, and preferably we will put some of the more compute intense transactions into one layer, and the final settlement we will do on the main layer, and preferably we will still be able to do that on simple devices so everyone can participate into that. But yeah, this suggests definitely that everyone, all the members need to have at least the same type of computational power and storage to store the ledger. And they discuss what will happen if you have this freeloader. So if the rest of the pool is doing their work and one is just trying to reduce cost and turning off their pool or doing whatever, you should have some form of penalty so they will not get their pro rata reward part without being I call it freeloader, here it's called free rider. But yeah, I think the viewer gets the point. That's not a good thing. So their approach is to penalize the party that diverges from the rest of the pool. So I guess that means, the penalty amount which is withheld from the pool is then distributed equally among the other pool members. So I guess that means that when there's a reward in the pool, if someone is penalized, their reward will then be equally distributed among the other members. Cool. Okay, I think that was all for me now. I will just bring it back to the start. I think this is a very interesting idea. I really look forward to seeing the community experiment with this. Maybe we don't get it right the first time. Maybe we can only implement parts of this. Maybe IOG or IOHK is working on something like this for all we know. But for me personally, I love to see the community also trying to experiment with this, taking this open research, great research, and trying to experiment with it, trying to implement it. So I'm all for it. It has to be done responsibly, and especially when it comes to smart contracts and where we put resources and how we sign this and everything. But the genie is out of the bottle, as they say. The idea is out there. I'm sure someone will implement this at some point. It makes a lot of sense. In proof of work, we have the same thing with the pooling of resources, many miners combining. This is slightly different because the weight is equally distributed, or roughly equally distributed, and everyone checks upon each other. But still, it's also a way to pool resources, as with a mining pool. So there are some similarities, and it makes a lot of sense. When barriers of entry is too large, you need to combine resources to have a say and a stake and a matter in the network. And for me, that can't possibly be a bad thing, to allow also smaller actors to also contribute and participate. So that was my small update on this research paper. If you like this type of format, let me know. I will keep experimenting now and doing more videos like this. See you later. Bye.